this morning, which is always wonderful. I'd like to call the Finance and Audit Committee meeting to order. And I'd firstly like to welcome all of you to our March 20th Finance and Audit Committee meeting and recognize that we are in the traditional territory of the Name First Nation. Our clerk today will be Ms. Sheila Gurry, in the absence of Ms. Snellgrove, who's ill, so we wish her well. Question period sign-up sheet is on the desk by way back here somewhere. We've got a sign-up sheet. There we are, by the computer. If any member of the gallery has a question on an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. And at the start of question period, I'll call up those who've signed up to address the committee. We have an introduction of several late items and changes. Ms. Gurry?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So for agenda item 6A, we're at the delegation from John Hankins. We are adding correspondence from the Mid-Island Business Initiative and letters of support from local organizations. So they have been included in your merged agenda and in the green pages that I believe you've received. For agenda item 7K, Gallows Point Dock and Ramp Repairs, we're adding a delegation from Gary Wykeham, David Carter from Protection Island Neighborhood Association. And then we're also removing agenda item 7N, purchase of new bylaw department fleet vehicle, removing that from the agenda. And that's it, Your Worship.
Very good. Motion for the adoption of the agenda is amended. Councillor Thorpe, second Councillor Bonner. All those in favour? Contrary, motion carried. Thank you. You've all had a chance to read the minutes. Motion for their adoption. So moved by Councillor Hemmond, seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favour? Motion carried. We have no presentations. And our first delegation is Mr. Hankins.
Your Worship?
Yes.
I'd like to put a motion forward to allow the delegation to speak for 10 minutes.
And there's a seconder, Mr. Turley. Discussion on the motion? I'll let Mr. Bonner go first.
I just thought that because of the importance of this particular presentation and the ask that is being sent to council, that we would like to hear in full depth what the proposal is.
Councillor Hemmons?
I believe that as a group we had a verbal agreement to keep delegations to 5 minutes, and I have personally been requested to extend delegations to 10 minutes and I've declined, and so I feel it would be unfair to offer the delegation extra time.
Councillor Thorpe and Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Your Worship. With all respect to Councillor Bonner and the delegation, I feel the same way as Councillor Hemmons. This is a precedent that I'm not prepared to make, and I think we have to be consistent.
Councillor Gesselbrock?
Just a question, was that precedent around not allowing the full 10 minutes specifically for a cow? I was under the standing committees, we allowed a bit more time and opportunity for in-depth dialogue. I'm just curious if there's specificity on that rule.
Ms. Gurry?
Thank you, Worship. So for committees, the procedure bylaw is what sets the rules. So where it's absent in the actual terms of reference, it is the procedure bylaw rules that we go by. So it is 5 minutes. It's not just committee of the wholes, it's council and all of committees.
Mr. Rudolph?
Well, Your Worship, as you know, there can be time for presentations and then it can be additional time for questions. So in the fullness of time, you might find a way to have all the answers fleshed out anyway. So there's procedures and then there's additional time for questions, and there is no time limit on the question period.
Any further discussion? All those in favour of Councillor Bonner's motion? Contrary? Motion defeated. Any further motions, or can we get on and let Mr. Hankins? Mr. Hankins, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have the screen up before my 5 minutes starts? Okay. So thank you, Mayor, Council, and staff for allowing me to be here today. I'd also like to recognise we're on the traditional territories of the Name First Nation. I was here in front of you at the Cow meeting in November when I basically introduced you to MIBI, what we've been up to, who our members are, and the activities we've done, and the fundraising we've done in terms of our campaign. Last time I was talking about the marketing campaign, so I wanted to give you a little bit of an update on that. It did launch in late December. In January, we did a kick-off event in downtown Vancouver. We had about 150 people there. The mayor was there wearing his full regalia and gave a great presentation on why people should come to Nanaimo in the Mid-Island. We were also supported there by Dale Lindsay and Bill Corsan, who were flying the flag for Nanaimo as well. We had the White Sails, we had Longwood, we had St. Jean's Cannery, all promoting what's going on here, and we also had great support from Tourism Vancouver Island as well as a lot of the business leaders from the MIBI side as well. There's a lot in here, but I've only got 5 minutes, so I'm just going to touch on really the 60,000 that we raised. So this was a marketing campaign really profiling this region, which would normally be done by a municipality. But we took that on ourselves and went out there to promote this region. And we were a fairly new organisation. We've only been around since 2017. And so we had two things to do. One, we had to convince people that MIBI was the right organisation to give money to. And then secondly, we obviously had to run the campaign. And we knew that we couldn't run an effective campaign unless we could raise at least $50,000. And so the fact that we got very close to $60,000 from the industry, and you'll see on the table here, they're all the companies that actually put hands into their pockets to pay for this campaign. So we had 24 organisations that paid, of which only 5 were MIBI members, and in total we currently have 15 MIBI members as well. So as we started to work through the campaign and also what MIBI was doing about attracting people here, we also wanted to look at what is the situation with regards to what's going on here in Nanaimo. We're like, who's the catching glove? So if we are able to attract a company here, who's going to actually help them come here? Who's going to actually be there hand-holding, picture glove, etc. And so we thought, well, let's compare to what's happening in Vancouver, Victoria and Kelowna, who are seen by the province as the top 3 tech centres. And you can see Vancouver is by far and away the number 1 tech centre. Victoria is coming up really strong. Kelowna's really come from nowhere to start really positioning itself. So where does Nanaimo sit, right? We saw lots of gaps there for us to be able to have any sort of a real role in the tech side. But the Minister Ralston recently was on a radio interview and he did mention Nanaimo as the 4th tech hub. I'm not quite sure if we can actually claim that for sure, but it's nice to hear that the Minister thinks that way. So we went back to industry. And this is the most important thing. This is industry-led, right? We're not just sitting in our organisation and dreaming up this stuff. We went to industry, sat down with all of the industry and said, well, what are the gaps? And they came up with these 4 key areas really around. We have a small talent pool. A small talent pool for the existing clients that we already have here, the customers here, as well as the people that we're trying to attract here. Eastside Games have set up an operation here. They came here about 6 months ago. They are being successful, but they're not getting the talent or being able to get access to talent like they would like to. So there's always a challenge they might leave again. So we really do need to make sure we can help them find the talent and train the talent. Access to capital, again, because we're not on the map, venture capital companies don't come here, angels, investors don't really come here on a regular basis. Trying to find access to information resources is limited, and then there's really no community building strategies around the tech side. There's no meetups, there's no other type of events, keynote speakers coming in, and they're cut off a little bit at the top there, but this is a brother and sister who came from India, went to VIU, they were on Dragon's Den, they got $125,000 worth of funding, and they have no idea who to speak to. I actually reached out to them and I've now started to connect them with people. And so how many other people are out there that don't know what we can do here? So that's why we launched MTech with Rebecca Kirk, who's at the back there, who's been running this for about 1.5 years with my support, all in kind through herself doing this. But we haven't been idle for the last 1.5 years. We created the council, and Chris Beaton is on it as well from the Nanaimo Aboriginal Centre, and David Whitty, who was at VIU but is now retired, who was the provost, he's on our committee as well. We've created an education and training committee, which has the School District 68, has VIU, and has industry at the table as well as Lighthouse Labs, which is an organisation out of Vancouver that is supporting us. And in your package there, I think Sheila Guri mentioned, there's 9 letters of support from the biggest players in the tech centre here in Nanaimo who are saying we need help and we don't want to be delayed. But it is a collaboration approach. You'll see all the different names, some of them cut off there, but the city's mentioned there, Innovation Island's there, planning, design and development's there. We can't do this in isolation. It has to be supportive. And so my last slide, I don't know why it's cutting off, I can't see the top part. So.
It's going to be up and down rather than slide. There.
Okay. So my last slide, within my 5 minutes. Since 2017, the private sector here has contributed $270,000 towards the economic development for this region. We've never once come in front in that whole time to ask council for any money. Yet we've contributed $270,000 towards that. When the MIBI board met to decide, are we going to continue for year 3, which is we're now in year 3, the condition really they would continue to fund, and they were all very happy to fund, but there was an expectation that council would come forward with some real desire in economic development. And so this is our first ask. We deliberately listening to the different debates and knowing where you are in your strategic plan, we've reduced it down. We'd ideally like to have had 1 year funding at 117,000, but we know that you're just rolling out your strategic plan. We believe this fits in it. It isn't in competition to it, and it's not ahead of it, because it's all going to help feed into the strategic plan. So we're asking for a minimum 48,000 for the next 6 months. It allows the council to really show leadership to the business community that you are serious about economic development. We are going to have a focus on downtown. If you look at the companies that are in the tech space, a lot of them are located downtown. You have real estate webmasters that have 3 buildings down there. Input Logic have just acquired the old Square One building and are starting to build that back up again.
And I think we're at our 5 minutes now,
Okay.
Mr. Hankins, and thank you for the excellent presentation. Councillor Armstrong is first up.
Thank you. Do you know of any other groups like this that have received municipal dollars? Because I'm just concerned that under community charter, we're not allowed to do this. So I'll be asking that of staff now.
I can't answer that in terms of the whether you're allowed to do that or not. I mean, normally, as we're located municipally, we're actually located in Nanaimo. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to if we were outside. I know with Infilm, when they came forward for money, they're located outside of Nanaimo, which was the challenge.
Thank you.
Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to the delegation. Could you tell us some of the deliverables that you'll be able to provide to us for the either 6 months or 12 months?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So within that, one of the things that's, if you look at the 4 areas that we're missing in terms of the talent pool, we have a tech search stack survey that's ready to be sent out to the tech companies, and that's really to identify what is their base programming that they use, and that will allow us to actually find out if we have the skill set or the training available. If not, we can bring that training over here. So that's why Lighthouse Labs is involved. I mentioned about access to information. That brother and sister who were in front of the Dragon's Den, nobody knows where to go, so we're basically copying, because there's no point reinventing the wheel. Okanagan have done a thing called the Hitchhiker's Guide to Tech, which basically tells you everything you need to know, who you need to go to, everything in one place. And so we want to recreate that here as well. So that's 2 of the deliverables. We want to bring in keynote speakers. We want to continue to bring other investors potentially in here. I'm already in discussions with a venture capital firm that's never been to Nanaimo before, that's now looking to come here. But we're talking about an event in May to do that. And again, just working with the university around the programming there. You saw in the education side, you have School District 68 who are looking to put an innovation school in. So we want to work with them. We want to work with VIU. So, having a small talent pool, we're not going to solve tomorrow in terms of you give me the money and then tomorrow I'm going to say, by the way, we've now got a huge talent pool. It's a bit like, if you're in forestry, best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now. So we really need to start this process now, but expect that to grow the talent pool is going to take a little bit of time. But if we don't start it, we never will.
Councillor Armstrong?
Well, mine's going to be for staff after. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Hemmons?
Thank you. Through you to the delegation, thank you very much for your work over the past couple of years. Regarding the letter of support from MIBI, can you talk a bit about the tech stack survey and what information that's going to give you? I've never heard that term before. Well, I've heard it from Rebecca, but just a bit more info.
Yeah, no, it's a term, actually, because I don't play in this space all the time in terms of tech. It was a term that was new to me as well. But it's basically it's the base programming that each of the different organizations use to actually develop all their software, all their programming, etc. And so if there's a commonality around there about which of the different companies are using that, then we can actually build training around that as well. So it's really their fundamental tech programming software that they're using, where we're looking for the gaps, we're looking for commonality, and then actually be able to fill the gaps by providing that training. Because at the moment, even though VIU is a tremendous asset to Nanaimo, it doesn't necessarily offer the type of training that the tech industry needs here. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Councillor Turley?
Thank you, Your Worship, to Mr. Hankins. So the question I have is maybe a little more general, but with regard to this initiative, how is that working with our city's economic development department? Is there some sort of a partnership there?
Yeah, I mean, Bill Corsan has been involved with a lot of the discussions. He was over at the marketing campaign that we launched there as well. So, and Bill, I know he's not here today, but he's certainly, indicated to me in our conversations that he's in full support of this initiative.
Any other questions?
Just one more.
Councillor Bonner.
If council decides not to fund this, can you tell me what would happen, like with this process as it is up till now?
I would say this process will not completely come to a grinding stop, but it won't maintain the momentum that it has, because we've really been relying on Rebecca's kindness to carry on doing this at no compensation for the last year and a half. So we actually, we're not going to let it die because it's too important, but we won't have we won't be able to put the traction behind it that it needs. And I think that's the most important thing, is that, I very much respect the process you're going through in terms of your strategic plan and the rollout. I don't believe this is getting ahead of it. I actually think this will actually help feed into that strategic plan. It will actually be a supportive mechanism for you. I know, because I didn't have my phone, I did actually, each of you, I left a copy of the blue brochure that's actually going out to all of our 200 targets that we're sending out to in Vancouver, so you can see some of the type of work that MIBI does.
Mr. Rudolph and Councillor Hammond.
Your Worship, I just want to comment on the process a little bit. As was discussed with our governance discussions with council and Mr. Cuff, he suggested that when we receive delegations with an ask of some kind, monetary or otherwise, that it be referred back to staff or a report. We don't want to turn this into a long turnaround time either. I realize there's probably some time sensitivity. The second piece around our economic development status is that council had the workshop on January 28th. The models were all laid out on the table for council. You received it for information. It's given you time to think about it. And our understanding in terms of our thinking is that we would be positioning ourselves to have a business case for the model for this year's budget process, and that would be for implementation in 2020. So this is dealing with an interim situation, and it is a bit of the cart before the horse in a way. So if you were looking at it, we would come back with some information about how this links with provincial programming. What about other funding partners? This is a regional initiative. How do we fit into that? There hasn't been any precedent for this. So we could give you that factual information, and then you can make a decision around the appropriateness of using these public dollars for this purpose at this time. So we recognize we're in a void to a certain extent on our function. We still have Emmerich here, who does a great job, but we're not working at a full capacity in a municipality of our size. Normally would have a larger investment in the subject of economic development, and so it's just a matter of what's the path forward to get to a place where we're comfortable with our role in the collection of agencies that are actually contributing to this, and what's our responsibility and niche. And it's true, I think we're lacking a point of call for a number of people, so all those are valid points, and I don't disagree with them, but it's at this stage, proper procedure we would recommend is receive for information, refer it to us for a report, give you the options that are on the table, and you can make the decisions. We don't want to turn this into a long process, but hopefully within a month we can come back to you, and or you could make an alternate decision today or anywhere along the line. So those are some of my initial thoughts.
Councillor Hammond.
Thank you. Understandably, something like economic development is really a community initiative, right? Like we don't want to do this in silos. So I'm wondering if you can speak to your partnerships with folks like the Chamber of Commerce or Innovation Island, who is also involved in work like this. Just tell us how you're interacting with them.
Yeah, well, there's a whole lot of other parties in there as well. So we come together as the promotional authorities meeting that MIBI set up. So we have the Chamber are at that, the Vancouver Island Conference Centre is at, Tourism Vancouver Island's at that, and then Bill Corsan from the city sits on that as well. And we use that as a way of looking at what events are coming to Nanaimo, what events could we attract, because as part of this MTech initiative, we want to attract events that actually work to those, to attract keynote speakers, attract conventions that fit with this as well. The more we can get people coming here, the more they get exposed to here. So we're working with the Chamber in that respect. Angel Forum came here recently. As a result of the work, we've been reaching out to all the different organizations out in Vancouver. Angel Forum reached out to us and said, hey, would you support us coming over to Nanaimo? We did. And then we worked with the Chamber and Innovation Island. We're involved in that as well. They actually spoke at the event as well. So this is a collaboration approach. It can't be non-collaborative. It has to work. And anybody, we have to get egos out of the way and allow people to, work together, as we won't be successful.
Any further questions to the delegation? Thank you very much. Councillor Martin?
I was going to move the motion to refer to staff and to report.
Councillor Gesselbrock, seconded. Any discussion on this? Councillor Thorpe, Armstrong, and Gesselbrock. My father.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, Mr. Hankins is back in the audience now, but I wanted to express my appreciation to him and for the work of MIBI. I think it's exciting, and I think we recognize that Nanaimo still has to find a path forward for our economic development, and that is something that we're certainly working on and very aware of. I think Mr. Rudolph's words are wise, but we need to refer this to get a report from staff on ramifications and how it ties in with our other lines of thinking on ECDEV. So I'll certainly support the motion for a report.
Councillor Armstrong?
Yeah, thank you. I was going to say earlier what Mr. Rudolph did. I just am concerned that about the community charter actually, but I think the work that they've done is critical for Nanaimo to move forward. And I think there's got to be a way that maybe we can be a part of it, whether it's through a city partnership with our economic hub. So I'll wait for staff's report, but I do think the work they've done is critical and want to thank them for keeping our city moving forward.
Councillor Gesselbrock?
I just want to say, I really support getting the opinion from staff, and I think that this proposal is excellent, and I think we really need to support our tech sector. Also, I really appreciate the initiative that MIBI has been taking and MTech on this, and I think that's the type of energy and the energy of collaboration and initiative that we need to really infuse our tech sector. It's something that a lot of us talked about when we were campaigning. And I think this way of having an external group provide that support when there has been a void really avoids us having to reinvent the wheel of something that we know we need. And we have a group that has a history and a connection to the NEDC as well that have been providing this service for a long time. So I think it's a pretty easy decision for me.
Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm a bit concerned about the time frame that's possible here. As we've been told numerous times, staff is at pretty well full capacity. Is there any way that we could have this wrapped up and delivered on our plate within the next 3 to 4 weeks so that we can make a decision on this quickly?
Your Worship, in response to Councillor Bonner, we have a target to come back to finance and audit in 1 month with what we have. It's sort of a two-part response. What is clarity around this particular proposal, whether it is a pilot project or however we want to characterize our contribution towards it. Second is mapping out a bit of a process forward in terms of next steps. And we had talked about maybe an economic forum or these types of things. I think the Mayor talked about that earlier on and getting on with that. And to have the stakeholders involved in the subject matter of related to economic development or economic activities in the community, and there's a lot of stakeholders. And we bring that together and we can forge that path in terms of, so that we would inform our business case for the fall and that type of thing. But, I think we have the ability to have a turnaround time to get you an information report on this for our next meeting.
Councillor Hammonds?
Thank you. A note on timing. I agree with everything that's been said. I do think in the absence of a strategic plan and in the absence of that economic roundtable that we had set $50,000 aside for in this year's budget, I would like to see those things solidified before we start putting money into different programming. I think that's just due diligence. So I don't know where we are in that process. I think our strat plan won't be finalized in 4 weeks' time, but just to say that I hear you, that we want to make sure we don't lose an opportunity, but I also think that we have to be responsible in ensuring that we have a plan in place, not just for this one, but for kind of all of it and how it all works together. So personally, I'm really happy to see it referred to staff and have a report, but I also am cognizant that this is one piece of a puzzle that we need to fit together. My 2 cents.
Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Worship. And just to that point, we know probably how this timeframe is going to work is, as Mr. Rudolph has pointed out, we're going to be doing all our due diligence, getting our strat plan in place. We're going to start talking about economic development. We're going to have some meetings, stuff like that, so that we can put it into our budget for 2020, which is a year from now, right? So this is something that seems to be working. And I think it's valuable to, certainly valuable to NIMA, and it does fill, as was pointed out earlier, a gap that we have right now, in that we, other than the very good work that our economic development is doing here at NIMO, this is all being done by the private sector on their dime and on their time. And I think it's time that the city of NIMO stepped up, which is not a terribly amount of money, all right? And help this move forward, because once we are finished our economic development and our economic planning, we're just going to board all this stuff together, and we'll have a great system going forward. It's just this thing would help us. I think that if we would put it into the plan so that it gets started in 2020, it'll wither on the vine. And that's my only concern.
Councillor Armstrong, thank you. Councillor Martin?
I want to echo Councillor Hammond's points because I agree 100%. I think we've talked about good governance, and as much as we want to help different groups, we've decided that we're going to follow our good governance model, which means that we have to do our due diligence through staff. If we make an exception for one group, then I think we're going to start having our exceptions for others. So I fully support what Councillor Hammond said. It's not that I don't support the work committee, but I do believe that we as a council have said that we want good governance, and that's part of it. And I would like to wait for the staff report and follow through with what we committed to doing, which was good governance. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe?
Thank you, Your Worship. Very quickly, I agree with Councillor Armstrong. It's not that this might not be a very good opportunity and might be worth following through on, but I don't think it's good governance to jump at it right away without hearing from staff. As Mr. Cuff advised us, first heard, deferred, and we need more information and to make sure that we're proceeding in a proper and cautious manner. So I'm quite happy to wait for a staff report at the next Finance and Audit meeting. Thank you.
Councillor Martin?
Thank you. And speaking to the motion, I'm happy that we're going to have a staff report back in a month, but I concur with Councillor Bonner. I understand due diligence and governance, but I also want to see some types of action happen this year and not in 2020. And I think when you frame it around a pilot project or a one-off, etc., I think that from time to time that's permissible. So that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Councillor Turley?
Thank you, Worship. So with regard to timing, I certainly agree that we need to get a staff report that I don't have any problem with, but it seems that councils tends at times to get bogged down on issues that really don't have a big price tag on them. And this isn't a whole lot of money, given some of the questions we've asked them recently. So my concern with Councillor Hammond's comments was, I kind of got the impression that we have to have a whole strategic plan in order, and that may or may not happen by the next meeting. And I don't think we can afford to wait until after we get the staff report. We need to get that, obviously, but to wait for everything else to fall into place, I think it's, I don't think it's good governance at all, because governance comes with the ability to have a city that actually can provide jobs for people and pay taxes. So, thank you.
Anything further? I just want to offer these comments, and much has been said around the issue of staff, and I think it's appropriate to recognize that Ms. Madhass has been carrying the can on this entirely for the city in terms of staff for some time now as a result of decisions made by previous councils. as have many other senior staff in our city who have been carrying burdens that are much heavier than might otherwise be the case. I agree that the prudent course is to have a staff report. I think it's always the prudent course, and I think we want to be known as a council that pursues that, regardless of the temptation or the desire or the strong support any of us may feel for any particular initiative that comes before us. Having said that, I'm conscious of the fact that this isn't like setting out on a voyage to the new world where you better make sure you have everything in place, or notwithstanding all the great intentions, you won't get to the other side. And, if you don't have enough water, if you don't have enough food, if you don't have enough lemons to prevent scurvy, it isn't like that. Right now, the business community and others, including the academic community, the VIU, which is an important part of our local economy, a significant part of our local economy, has chosen to support an initiative that I think is important and valuable. And it is a small amount of money. Relatively speaking, Councillor Turley's quite right. I mean, I've always jokingly said the amount of debate is directly related to the amount of money involved. The smaller the sum, the longer we talk. And I'm the last person and the last speaker and probably guilty of it, and although I may inspire some of you to say something. So having said that, yes, let's pursue the prudent course, but I want to say now, I'm not convinced we have to wait for a strategic plan and a perfect book of where we're going to go in terms of our local economy and put off initiatives that may come before us that we think will have economic benefit. I must say I'm extremely impressed with this document. Firstly, I love statistics, which is always important, and what it says is that we have significant advantages over other communities because everybody wants the high-tech sector. Everybody. That goes without question. But what is it that our community has to offer as opposed to other communities? Because we're all competing on the same playing field. Nobody wants to talk about the so-called dirty jobs, if you will, the manufacturing jobs. Everybody wants the high-tech jobs, and this is one aspect to pursue that, but as part of it, it's only one aspect of what will be a larger economic plan for the community. So unless someone wants to follow what I've had to say, I'm going to call for the vote. Do I see any hands? All those in favor of the motion? Contrary? Motion carried. Thank you very much. And thank you again to the delegation and to all of those who have worked with them to get this before council. Next are reports. Budget 2019 budget carry forwards. Ms. Mercer.
Thank you, Your Worship. At the end of each year, a review is done of all of our capital and operating projects, and this review identifies whether they have not been completed or if they've been delayed, and those projects then are added to the following year's budget as carry forward items. In 2018, we've identified approximately $44.8 million in carry forwards, and these will be added to the final 2019-2023 financial plan. And this report before council provides you with a detailed listing of the 2018 projects that are being carried forward to 2019. And that's, yeah. So it's for your information if there's any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Mercer. I just have a question when we're under the public safety and a public food in front of you. When you say police services internal orders, what is that referring to? Internal orders capital. It was budgeted at 229 and only 105. That's not salary dollars. Is that like equipment, etc.? He's responsible.
Sorry, which one are you looking at?
Under public safety attachment A.
Okay.
Just don't know when it's like bylaw park and it comes out internal orders capital. It was budgeted at 250 went to 598, so we were in deficit of 189%. I just want to know what that refers to. Because I'm assuming that's not operating dollars.
So there's the internal orders are operating projects, and the ones that start with P are capital projects. So it's just, that's how we classify them in the financial statement, so that's what that is. And you were...
Because I'm just wondering where it says police service internal orders is 229,000. Like, I don't understand what that's for.
You want, Wendy can, she's quicker at this because she put it together.
Through the chair to Councilor Armstrong. So that'll be a variety of projects. A lot of the police services projects will actually relate to the police operations building. So it would be an HVAC project or a mechanical project.
Okay, so
to
it's
work
not
within the
operations.
facility. No, it is not operations.
And that's the same with fire?
Same with fire. Those will be projects for buying fire equipment, repairs to fire halls, those sorts of projects. And really, as Ms. Mercer mentioned, the distinction between capital and internal order is just our finance policy for capitalization.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Mr. Rudolph.
I was hoping if we could ask Mr. Sims to speak to the engineering projects in particular, because it's 3/4 of this is in the engineering side. And he'll probably tell you that, you know, these projects go between budget years and those types of things, but just, you know, it's a significant number here, and I just want to make sure you understand why this is coming forward this way. And there's always carry forwards, but this year is a little larger than we would like it to be, probably in sort of a path forward. So may I ask that he comment on the 32 million part of this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As Mr. Rudolph mentioned, this is often a red flag when engineering public works projects to this level or this number gets carried forward. And it's like, why aren't we finishing our projects? It is the sort of natural question that comes up. So, as Mr. Rudolph mentioned, one of the reasons is project life cycles do not follow budget years. January 1st, December 31st. We'll often start, at some point in the year, and we carry the entire value of the project year over year. So that's one element. There's a column for delays that includes weather delays, challenges with contractors. For instance, last year we had we get a paving contractor to do a number of our projects because they were busy on the island. So sort of carry that money forward. There's also potential challenges with staff capacity. We've been sort of constrained over the last number of years, and that's kind of created a backlog of projects. Mr. Rosen talks about a pig in a python phenomenon. So we have this sort of big blob of projects that we're trying to digest. And in the last year or so, we've got our staff capacity up to snuff, and we're hopeful that we'll start to nibble away at that large backlog. So projects that are in progress, they're labeled in progress. We've started them and they're rolling forward. We carry the entire amount forward to the next year without, if there's an updated budget, we don't carry the updated budget. We just carry the updated cost, we carry the entire amount forward. And then the other ones are sort of multiple year projects and that kind of thing. That's kind of it in a very large nutshell. Probably the biggest thing that we're really watching is this concept of a backlog. And we're hopeful that as time goes on, we'll start to nibble away at that to start to get this amount down.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, thank you, Mr. Sims. I understand those constraints. I'm just curious, would you say that the main issue with delays is an internal city capacity, or is it more a problem of finding contractors?
That's a good question, Mr. Chair. I think it's a bit of both. I think the constraint of city staff capacity as against the sort of the required volume of projects that we need to build to keep our city functioning is probably the larger one. We've had a few projects where we've actually canceled the tender because we've only received one bid or we haven't received any bids out there. But that's more the exception than the norm. If you sort of look through the report, there's 230 lines, not all of those are projects, but 230 lines of work that we're sort of working on, and 75 or 80% of that is well in progress. And I think going forward, there has been a couple of business cases put forward by engineering to add additional project management capacity that will help increase this along, but we've deferred those until the next budget year.
Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Looking at it, because there's some large numbers, like I was looking at the emergency water supply, yes, which is like 2 million. Are you guys going to prioritize those as to, or how does that get done? So which is going to be your priorities, or is that done by, hopefully not council?
No, of course not. Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. That's a good example of a project that was staff capacity. Me in my new role wasn't able to sort of pump that along last year. It's in progress. We did the design last year, and it was just one of the delayed projects. It's coming in, the tender's closed, we'll be coming back to council in early April with a report on that. We will start construction on that this year.
Thank you.
These don't get dropped, they continue.
Yeah, I was just wondering on the priorities, just because I would think emergency water would be a priority.
It is.
Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's probably just a general question to staff or even Mr. Rudolph. Having in my past life as council critic, as one person pointed me out.
Just one?
Just one. I looked at these carry forwards for the last couple of years, and they are going up, and kind of figured why they were going up previous. I'm a bit concerned they're still going up, so this may be just a carry on of momentum. But I was wondering if there's anything, two things. Has staff looked at the possibility of using less contractors and actually possibly doing some of these jobs themselves? Or the other option, other thing is there any way that we can help increase staff capacity in the short term so that some of these get more done?
Your Worship, this is not a dissimilar situation in some respects to the building inspection function. There's the capacity challenges of finding the resource people to actually do these functions. One of the stopgap measures that we have, and it was the same employed in Abbotsford when I was there, is bringing in outside contractors to work internally for a period of time. It's a much more expensive option. In this case, we have Collier's employee. We had 4 of those in Abbotsford. It's the same problem, backlog, trying to find the capacity to move things forward. So I think this is worthy of a concern that we are not keeping up with the wish and the need probably from our asset management point of view to move forward. So there's been a bit of a capacity challenge. Mr. Sims was doing 2 jobs last year. His job was part of it. So we've had some capacity challenges. This isn't going to get fixed overnight. We need to work our way through this. These are large things, and it's part of. There are interim solutions, and Ms. Mercer had to find some support from retired folks to come in and do it. So we're looking at those options. It's not just that people don't want to work here. It's not the case. It's that we can't find certain skill sets at times to get, so the resources aren't there. So this is a backlog. We need to work our way through it. The numbers should start to turn and go down. I would be certainly hopeful that we'd see a much smaller number next year. So I'm not sure I answered your question, but it's kind of a commentary on the situation.
Well, the only thing I would bring up is as a council person, I'd be more than willing to look at some of our reserves to help with that capacity of using outside contractors, just so if the staff thinks that it would help with that. And I know that that's not an operations thing, that's a contractor, so we can do that. And with all respect. Well, but I get those things, I would say, some staff. But I would be willing to look at some of that.
Councillor Turley. Sorry, Councillor Turley and Councillor Gessel.
Thank you, Worship. This is probably just a specific question, but under the Esplanade Nickel to Trace construction, it says delayed, but I'm assuming that's the one that they're actually working on in front of Salvation Army area.
Which one?
Nickel Street, Grace.
Nickel Street.
Right. Right. So it was budgeted in 2019, we tendered it late 2019 or 2018.
So when it says delayed, that means it doesn't, is that different than in progress? Because some are indicators in progress and some are, say, delayed. I just wonder what the difference is.
At the time that this carry forward work was done, project had started in 2018, so it was carried forward to 2018. So that was the quote delay. It's underway.
Yeah. Councillor Gessel.
Just building on what Councillor Bonner said, I mean, we did have a surplus as a result of staffing gaps from the past, and if we do have this big pig going down the python, with the development permits, that's like constant thing that I hear from the community and say Public Works. I don't know if we can, efficiently get some outside help to just sort of, push the pig so then we can get back onto our regular workflow, as opposed to just sort of having a compounding. I don't know if we just slow down the rate so that we're not taking on as much to reduce the pig, or if we need to come in and reduce it so that we can just keep up with the regular flow of stuff that needs to happen. But I would be definitely supportive of being more flexible and creative in how we approach that.
Yeah, Councillor Hammonds.
Mr. Rudolph, correct me if I'm wrong, what I heard you say is that next year we can anticipate these to be lower.
I would anticipate it to be lower.
So I would suggest that we probably don't need to do anything if this is going to sort itself out over
I think
the next year.
yeah, so just to be fair, there's only so much we can do properly. So even if we had a whole series of extra people, the capacity to manage those effectively maybe exceed our realistic ability. So there's been a bit of a backlog, and we're going to catch up and work our way through over a couple of years. So on the books, it looks like we're carrying forward a lot of things and stuff, but we do have, I think we're on the path to correcting this. We're also looking at our organizational capacity and reviewing that right now. So I think it will work its way out as we prudently assess our capacity and how we manage these projects. And maybe some of them should be taken off the books, I don't know. We certainly had that conversation with the finance department. If you're not doing them, why are they on the books? So I think that's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek comment, but I think obviously there's a desire to do them, and there's a need from an asset management, refreshing our infrastructure, that type of thing. So we know that, so we're okay. It's just we're on a path to recovery here and fixing this.
Mr. Sims, did you wish to say something?
I would just echo what Mr. Rudolph said was that, as Mercer presented, we're $1 billion worth of work in the next 20 years. That equals $50 million a year that we need to sort of pay through. So that's it, a very simplistic view, but it's really about recovery of our, making sure our investments are up to snuff.
Councillor Martin.
Is it too early, or can I move the to be received for information, the report to be received for information?
My sense is Ms. Richards has been questioned quite a bit. Is there a seconder? Councillor Armstrong. Any discussion? Councillor Bonner.
No, one point which I think is actually a positive, well, it is a positive here, is that some of the last reports showed projects being canceled, actually quite a few, and I don't see any being canceled in this one, so things are all going through.
The ones, if they were canceled, they wouldn't show up on this list at all. They would have stayed in the surplus for those in the fund, if it was funded from general revenue. So this report is strictly only ones that we are continuing work on in the following years.
Trying to get it nice.
Any further discussion? Motion is to be received for information. All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carries. Thank you. The next is the Nanaimo Volunteer Information Center Society other grant funding request. And Ms. Mercer.
Thank you, Your Worship. For many years, the Nanaimo Volunteer and Information Center Society has applied for another grant to cover their facility rental cost at Bevan Park, where they host their annual volunteer appreciation luncheon. The Society meets all the qualifications outlined in the other grant intake, and staff are looking for recommendation to award the grant. Just a bit of a background, the last grant that the Society applied for was in 2016, and at that time the previous council approved an annual other grant to cover the cost of their rental for the length of their term. So as the last council term is up, the Society is back in front of council to ask for their 2019 rental costs to be covered for their luncheon to be held on April 11th. Currently there is $7,000 in the other grant budget, and nothing has been spent to date.
Councillor Armstrong.
I'd like to move the recommendation for get on the table of the amount of $1,546, and then that we continue this for the duration of our term as well.
Seconded by Councillor Turley. Any discussion? Councillor Thorpe, Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll certainly support the motion, but just for background information, in case anybody is wondering, it was always asked by the previous council, why don't we just waive their fees for Bevan, the rental of Bevan for this event? And the answer is that it's covered under bylaws. We have bylaws that charge so much for the rental, and we don't make exceptions to that. So they have to pay the rental fee, but then if they qualify, they can turn around and ask for a grant if they qualify. So it's sort of taking out of one pocket, putting it into the other. It seems cumbersome, but I think it's actually the best way to approach it. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. And I would probably point out to people on council, the majority of these things that we're looking at in this next section would have been looked at by the Grants Advisory Committee, who would have gone through all of the work, read all the things, and then just given us a list of things they recommended, which would save everybody a lot of time and trouble. So I look forward to at least that committee showing up in the future.
Well, to following Councillor Thorpe's remarks, all's well that ends well. Any further discussion? All those in favour of the motion? Contrary, motion carried. Thank you very much. The next is the community action. Thanks, Ms. Mercer. The next is the community action team funding extension. Mr. Holm.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm actually going to turn this over to Ms. Bopalsing to present.
Very good. Good morning.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. So this report is a staff report for decision. In 2018, we received funding from the BC Emergency Overdose Response Centre and the Ministry of Health in order to deal with the opioid crisis. And as a result, Nanaimo has something called a community action team. This report is as a result of, we received $100,000 in funding, and we are being offered an extra $800,000 to increase capacity for opioid response. Oh, sorry.
I wish it was 800,000.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Thank you very much.
That's what Jeremy's doing.
That's right, thank you. An extra $8,000 to address capacity for supporting Indigenous community members with our opioid response actions. And so this has come out of discussions with the First Nations Health Authority and the Overdose Response Centre, and so we're being asked to receive and hold that money for distribution for that use.
Councillor Armstrong.
Move the motion.
Seconded. Councillor Shirley. Discussion. Councillor Shirley, then Councillor Hemmons.
So the only question I have, if you were
Ms. Bopalsing.
I may not be directionally challenged, but I do forget things. Inside joke. The question I have is, because it appears that this is specifically for Indigenous community members, which I have no problem with, the concern is, are we responsible for tracking it? And if so, how is that going to happen, and how much staff time is going to be involved?
So the Community Action Team is a partnership, it's a collaborative, and while we're the backbone funded, so we receive the funding, the CAT team is accountable for documenting its spending.
Thank you.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. Through you to Ms. Pulsing. Does the First Nations Health Authority identify how they want Indigenous engagement to happen, or is that up to the community? And if it's up to the community, do we have the right partners on the CAT? Okay.
Okay, through the chair to Councillor Hemmons. That's a really good question. So the idea of this funding is that each community gets to customize how it approaches its response. And the CAT team currently has a nurse from Nanaimo who attends, and we're hoping that we'll have other representation from another nation and others. So they will be involved in directing how that money gets applied and used.
Just a follow-up to that, I think that's really important because Nanaimo is just a small portion of our Indigenous population, so it'd be great to see representation from either Tillicum or the Aboriginal Centre to figure out how to use that.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Motion having been moved, all those in favour? Contrary, motion carried. Thank you. The next, Seniors Connect funding extension. Mr. Holm again.
Thank you, Your Worship, and you're going to spot a pattern here. I'm going to...
Sorry, Councillor Bonner.
I think I'm in conflict on this one because I do a lot of business with many of the people that are going to receive this funding.
Note of caution, always about.
Smart move.
Thank you.
Councillor Turley might receive some of this funding too.
Aren't you 65? Yeah, I'm close.
I think we've read enough from the pots and the kettles this morning.
Age is not a conflict of interest.
Do carry on.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Again, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Gopal Singh to present.
Okay, so this report is another report for decision on receiving an extension to funding for the Seniors Connect. So we have been in progress with receiving funding as part of a collaborative called Seniors Connect, which includes a partnership between the city, Nanaimo Family Life, the Nanaimo Hospital Foundation Lifeline Program, Health Wealth Foundation, and the Nanaimo Women's Resource Center. As part of that, we received approximately $2 million over a 3-year period. The city received a fairly modest sum out of that, just around $168,000, that was used for something called the Living History Series, and also the City Builders Program, which has allowed us to build age-friendly infrastructure, including transit, better transit shelters, age-friendly crosswalk, and also some benches. The purpose of this funding is to really enhance connectivity and reduce social isolation for those over 55. And we have an opportunity to extend this funding as bridging funding with continuing with our partners, and this represents an 8-month extension, of which the city would receive approximately $15,500. And we would use that to continue the projects that we have in the works around looking at improving transit shelters in particular. And by partnering with the other groups, it also allows them to receive the full amount of $388,000. So this is bridging funding, and you may recall that on February 11th, we came forward to you with asking for your support for doing an expression of interest to continue this funding through to 2024. So this bridging funding would take us to December, and then after that, if we're successful with the other application with our partners, we would be able to continue beyond that.
Councillor Armstrong.
Move the recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor Hemmings. Any discussion? No comments whatsoever, isn't that interesting? All those in favor? Contrary, motion carried. Councillor Armstrong, thank you. Treat Councillor Bonner. We don't wish to feel him left out. The next item is the cultural facility multi-year lease agreements. Again, Mr. Holmes.
Again, thank you, Your Worship, and once again, I'm going to turn this one over to Ms. Gopal Singh to present.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the report before you today is again another report for decision. What we're looking at here is responding to a motion from council made asking us if by May 2019 we would engage with the arts and culture community to see which of those groups would benefit from extending multi-year lease agreements. So this report is in response to that. Staff has engaged with the operators and the arts nonprofit groups who operate the Port Theatre, the Art Gallery, the museum, the Vancouver Island Military Museum, and the Harbour Theatre. These are all the facilities we own. And there's consensus that extending the lease terms would help them access a wider variety of both federal and provincial funding. We looked into the different types of funding and the restrictions, and there was certainly a provincial funding through the Cultural Gaming Grant that requires arts and culture groups to either own their facilities or have a 10-year lease agreement in place. In terms of, we have a variety of different arrangements with our different arts and culture groups operating our facilities. And I'd just like to point out that the Art Gallery currently does have a 10-year. The Port Theatre has a 5+5 year. with the discretion, basically a 5-year operating lease agreement with the option at the city's discretion to extend that. And the one that is a bit of an anomaly is the Harvest City Theatre, which is a more recent purchase by the city. And because of how new that entity was back in 2014, the city had decided to do a 3-year license a co-management lease agreement with a 2-year extension. So with that, we looked at that, and definitely what this would give, by allowing a more consistent approach, it would allow the groups to have certainty and also apply for a wider variety of funding.
Councillor Turley.
I think I need to excuse myself, but my wife is a member of the Symphony Board.
Councillor Armstrong.
Move the motion for get it on the table.
Seconded. Councillor Bonner.
Question. Just concerning if this was to go, how are we going to decide which facilities are subject to that? Because I can see if we say one is and one's not, we can start getting in conflict. So I'd be very concerned if we do this, how that's going to be drafted. And I'm sure that would be something that our legal team would look at. But, you know, like if we said we were going to do Navajo's Arts Council, but we're not going to do the Canadian Federation of Artists, so that then I could see some conflict in the community. So I would have a concern about how that's done, who's going to make that determination. Do you have an answer to that? Or?
I guess through your worship to Councillor Armstrong, that's why this report is before you, is to see if you'd like a consistent approach across all the buildings and facilities we currently own. Or if you'd like a customized approach, which is how we've been approaching things to date.
Just for a point of clarification, then it's for city-owned buildings?
Correct.
Okay,
yes.
That's great.
Yes.
I'm fine with that. Thank you. I missed that. Appreciate
Yes.
the clarification.
Councillor Hemmings.
Thank you. Through you to Ms. Bopalsing. Are there other organizations that request these types of arrangements, and how do we select who gets to be in these co-management agreements with us?
That's a very good question. I might defer to Director Harding to answer that.
I gotta move back and get ready.
So the co-management agreement is one where we used to just do straight leases, and so a little bit more arm's length. Co-management, really what we realized over the years, particularly with asset management and assisting these groups and organizations, particularly really running city facilities, but doing the operational side of things. So it's really looking at buildings where we want to make sure that we're assisting the groups, but also maintaining the city asset as long as we can. So those are where we really look at the co-management side. It started back with Kin Pool, actually. We started with the co-management with Kin Pool, operated by the Summer Club. We're in there quite a bit because of managing the pool, and we extended it to the Port Theatre, then the museum, and art gallery, so forth. So.
And a follow-up, this seems like a really positive move to me. I heard during the campaign that there were opportunities for funding being missed out on because of lease agreements. But it seems, my read of the report is that when that was a potential for, say, the gallery, the city was flexible and then redid that lease agreement. So I guess I'm curious, it seems to me that we're flexible enough in our current standards to meet the needs of these organizations, but yet we're creating this policy to standardize it, which I support. I guess I'm just kind of curious whether it's true or not that folks were missing out on funding opportunities, because if the gallery came and said, hey, we have an opportunity here, can you extend our lease, and we did, I think that's great. And do we know of any organizations that have applied for these provincial funding pots and not been able to get it?
Mr. Harding.
Not to my recollection. I think the one that's still a little bit separate is the new theater, on Victoria Avenue. That's one that was still on more of a license of use or a lease agreement, just because, again, as Paul Singh said, it's relatively new. It was a new group that was taking over. The other thing I would mention to council is that a lot of these groups and organizations, though, do have funding. And so what happens is our funding then gets rolled into these co-management agreements. And that's why we typically, under financing, we typically don't do long agreements. But then in the co-management, so there's exit clauses for both organizations. So even if we do go to 10, council still has exit clauses, as do the organizations, so everyone's protected if other issues happen financially.
Thank you, if I may. I'm in full support of this. I think it's a wonderful idea to standardize. I was just curious whether what I had heard during the campaign was valid or not. It seems like we're quite flexible in the current way without the new 10-year lease agreement. That's all.
I guess through your chair to Councillor Hammonds. I guess, sorry, that was a comment more than a question.
It was just a comment, yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through the staff. I'm really thankful that this has come forward. I really appreciate it. I like the concept of a bit of a flexibility in terms of I trust staff to look at the particular person wishing to rent the facility and viewing things along those lines. I do know that we will probably have more arts. I'm hoping that we'll have more arts and cultural facilities coming forward, and that these may become more of them than less. I do know that the Harbour City Theatre specifically said to me during the campaign that they weren't eligible to apply for a particular grant because they didn't have a 10-year lease, and this will certainly help them out there getting more of their things happening there. So I'm quite in support of it. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe and Councillor Gesselmark.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm in support of this as well, and I think it's good to give some sense of assurance to the cultural organizations that are identified in this report. My only concern would be if there was any potential downside to the city. If, for example, the city in 4 or 5 years decided that we wanted a certain building or space for another reason. I'm hearing that we have exit clauses that would accommodate if that happened, and so that gives me assurance.
Yes, Your Worship, to Councillor Thorpe. All the co-management agreements, we can extend them out those years, but there's exit clauses for both organizations. And then council always has a chance. There's some notices we have to do that they vary. Some are 6 months, some are a year, some are 9 months. But there's a notice clauses in each of the agreements.
Okay, thank you. And if I may, Your Worship, a follow-up to Mr. Harding. I know this report and this motion refers to cultural facilities, buildings. I understand that. Do we have any sports organizations that are in a lease agreement for a building? Curling club, perhaps?
We have many. So the curling club, we've moved more towards a co-management also, although it's still closer to a lease because we don't provide them any operating funds, but we do provide some issues on capital planning. But we have a number of different leases. So we have I think over 45 different leasing licenses. We have lots. So, but co-management agreements, the majority of our co-management are with cultural facilities. Again, though, Kin Pool was one of our first we started.
So did I hear you
Yes.
correctly that actually leased buildings by sports groups, we have that many?
Yes. A lot of them are licenses of uses. A lot of them are leases. We have everything from the golf course, which of course is a for-profit, but the rugby club, football club, soccer at Bevan, boys and girls are the scouts. I could go on and on.
Okay, thank you. I didn't realize those
Please
were
do a list of all those things.
Thank you.
Land Barons, Councillor, Land Barons.
I did.
Mr. Harding, for you, please. Would it make more sense, and instead of us saying cultural, would it make more sense for us to say any, I guess business or whatever, that we have a co-management agreement with? Would that make more sense so that it's fair to the sports facilities and everybody than versus just the culture?
Your Worship, to Councillor Armstrong, so every group organization is a little different stages, and so not every one we'd want to do a co-management. Some of them are because of, for example, BMX, we do a license of use because it's not a true lease. There's people transferring over it. There's throughout the day. So every organization is a little bit different. So sometimes we'll just go back to a license of use agreement. Some have a lease because we don't have anything involved with them operationally. But if there makes sense for us to have a co-management where we're doing either providing them funds, for example, McGurr Sports Complex, it's still under a license of use, and then the grant is over here. We need to actually come back to council with them with a co-management agreement because there's a sports group that we need to do a co-management, so we need to do that one. So everyone's a little different, so I don't think there's one I'll use cookie cutter approach to them. This particular issue, my understanding is that there's some cultural funding that is limiting to particular groups that they don't have a longer term agreement. Sometimes that's not the case with sports
Okay, thank you.
organizations.
Appreciate the clarification.
Anything further? We've talked so long, I think we do have the motion on the table, don't we?
I believe so.
Goodness gracious. Who's going to move it?
Hit them all. I moved it.
I thought, yes.
Yes, it's done, sorry. It
Yes,
is done.
yes.
I'm moving them all.
We do have the motion on the table.
Yes, we
I'm not putting my mind. Thank you, this is good. All those in favor? Contrary, motion carried, thank you. Someone can bring in Councillor Sherman. Thanks. Harbor City Theatre, 25 Victoria Road, asset management update. Mr. Holm, does the matter continue?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. This is the final item I'll be turning over to Ms. Gopal Singh to present.
Okay, so the report before you is one for information, and this ties into the previous report about lease agreements for our cultural facilities. So this one is specific to the Harbour City Theatre on 25 Victoria Road, which the city purchased in 2013. And this is basically giving you an overview of what the city has invested in this facility to date. We will be coming forward to council with a request to, their lease is up at the end of June, and we'll be coming forward to council with another report looking at a recommendation to extend their lease and also reviewing their operating grant. So what you have before you is that the city purchased the Harbour City Theatre, I beg your pardon, it was in 2008 for $451,000. And since then, we've invested in an additional approximately $400,000 into the theatre between 2008 and 2018. And so to date, our investment into that facility is approximately $860,000. And what we've given you is our estimates. We can get into more detail if you need that in a future report that show you what we've got budgeted for 2019 and beyond. So, as I said, you will be getting another report on looking at a multi-year lease agreement and a review of their operating grant coming forward.
Councillor Marvin?
I'd like to make a motion to receive the report for information.
Seconded, Councillor Armstrong. Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried. The next is the travel assistance grant, Dover Bay Secondary Grade 9 girls basketball. Mr. Harding, given the amount of money involved, I'm sure we'll have a robust debate.
Can we do GH? Are we able to do GHI together, since they're just assistant?
I don't believe so. Sorry, but thank you for the effort. Mr. Harding wants his time to the mic this morning.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, we have two travel assistant grants. We'll go through them quickly, then proposed change for Council's consideration of how we deal with these grants. So the initial one is a recommendation that the Finance and Audit Committee recommend that Council approve the request from Dover Bay Secondary School girls basketball team for a travel assistant grant in the amount of $600 for 12 players to attend the Grade 9 girls basketball provincial championship held February 28th through March 2nd in Port Moody, BC.
Moved by Councillor Turley, seconded by Councillor Hemmons. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Mr. Harding, Travel Assistance Grant, Van Crowland Special Needs Hockey Association.
Your Worship, so the Finance and Audit Committee recommend that Council approve a request from Vancouver Island Special Needs Hockey Association for Travel Assistant Grant in the amount of $2,000 for 20 players to attend the Southern California Special Needs Hockey Festival to be held April 26th through April 28th in Valencia, California.
Mr. Mover, Councillor Hemmons, seconded Councillor Turley. Any discussion?
Yes, I will, Your Worship. Thank you. I just want to credit staff with recognizing that this is a slightly special request and does not qualify in every term for the grant, but nevertheless, it just makes sense and it's quite appropriate it be given. So thanks to staff for spotting that.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carried. Thank you. The next is the Travel Assistance Grants Approval Process. Mr. Harding.
Your Worship, this is building off Ms. Mercer's presentation last week on grants. This is an option for council, one granting process where you may want staff to do these grants, and we'd update you twice a year. So recommendation is that Finance and Audit Committee recommend that council approve a change in the process for approving travel assistant grants by authorizing staff to approve travel assistant grants as per criteria, and directing staff to provide a report to the Finance and Audit Committee with biannual updates on the distribution of funds. And just a note of this, so these funds are $7,500. They're first come, first serve. If we do run out of funds, which we rarely do, but we would come back to council and advise them of these issues. It's a different process.
I'd like to move the motion as presented and just, first and seconder.
Seconder, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Martin.
Just to speak to that, I think in this kind of thing, it's time we empowered the staff.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is actually one of those things that was also reviewed by the Grants Advisory Committee. And I would probably think, was it? I remember you looking at them. It's under other grants.
I think what happened, sorry, Councillor, Worship, Councillor Bonner, I think groups would come to the finance or the grants advisory for some other funding, which they may have referenced they're going to get this plus some other funding, so they may have been meshed together. Councillor Thorpe may also have some background on it.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I wanted to speak to this anyway, and I have to disagree with Councillor Bonner. I don't think I can hear. Again, that's twice in one evening, but good morning. Yes, it just seems long. I've never seen your thing. Thank you. This is going nowhere fast. What did I start to say? Just, as Councillor Bonner pointed out earlier, as of 2 years ago, many of these items would have come through different city committees. I think this particular one would have come through the Parks and Recreation Committee. Others would have come through Culture and Heritage or Public Safety or whatever. And all of those committees had public involvement on them. It was decided to change the process and have all of the money grant requests come to this one committee of the whole. Whether that's a good change or not, I think we still need to debate and decide. I think there's pros and cons both ways. So in the meantime, I'll support this recommendation, but I think it is a discussion that we will have when we determine our future committee structure. Thank you.
Councillor Hammonds.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Harding, a question. You noted that these are rarely maxed out, and I'm wondering, does the city advertise these opportunities to all sport groups, and does everyone, or do you have to kind of know in order to apply?
Your Worship, to Ms. Councillor Hammonds, we do, and actually in the last few years we have been utilizing more because previous council changed the criteria to make it a little bit more appealing to some group organizations to make it to some other events. So, for example, I think it was provincials or some regionals. We could actually go to regionals, and so it made it more. Before it was pretty restrictive, where it could only either be nationals or provincials, I believe it was. And so it reduced it. We also expanded to cultural organizations too, so choirs, concert groups, things like that.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
I just wanted to pick up on Councillor Thorpe's comments. Staff have been talking about this and the function of this committee versus the decentralized model that we might have had in the previous. And this is something to be mindful of as we conclude our conversations around the GPC, the Committee of the Whole, Finance and Audit, and other committees, and in the extension of the public engagement process. Richard and I were just talking this week about the fact that this is becoming a business place where all of council is sitting at a table making those types of decisions. And so we're kind of cultivating a role for this, which is more of a business-like session dealing with all things financial. Ms. Mercer is being asked to sign off on every report that comes through this committee. So I think financial we're directing towards, unless there's a unique circumstance, timing or something like that, towards this committee. So as we get back to the conversation around GPC and finance and audit, just be mindful of, today's sequence of conversation and just, are we on the right path, or is this something that you would like to revisit? So I think it's worthy of noting that this is we're kind of moving forward in a new way, similar but different than the past. And is this
working for you, this format, and trying to focus with all of council and independence in making these decisions? Or do we add another step, which would decentralize this, and then it would still come back to council? So it's just a thought.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carried. Thank you. On to item 7J, bid to host the 2021 Royal Bank Cup National Junior A Hockey Championship. Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Worship. Page 90-92, we have a short report from Damon Johnson, who introduces our manager of arenas, who's also here to answer any questions. However, we're looking to obtain support from Finance and Audit to recommend to Council support the Nanaimo Junior A Hockey Club bid to host the Royal Bank Cup National Junior A Hockey Championship in 2021, so not next year, so 2 years out. If the bid is successful, commit up to $30,000 in the 2021 budget for the event, which was similar to when we did the event previously.
Councillor Armstrong.
I'd like to move the recommendations A and B.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmons. Councillor, I'll let Councillor Armstrong speak to the motion first.
Thank you, yeah. I think this is a great thing. I mean, if anybody had the chance to go to the lacrosse, it brought in people from all over. It was really well received by the community. It made a lot of money, so I think this is a really good news item if we were successful in the bid. Thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship, you to Mr. Harding. So I do support this. The only question I have is in the letter from the Junior A Clippers from Tally Campbell. There's a paragraph said in order to, actually the second question is sentence, we're requesting $330,000 funding to the city for the event along with the use of facilities at no cost to the event. So it's actually going to be more than $30,000.
Your Worship, no, we've advised the Clippers that's not, and we do not do that. We don't waive fees. So they're aware that we provide the $30,000. We don't give them the $30,000. The $30,000 is there to offset certain costs which they pay. If they want to use that $30,000 towards fees, they can charge the fees to the facilities there.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, so to that last point, it's similar to the earlier request. It's sticking to the bylaw, not waiving the fees, but allowing them to access money to make up for that. My question, Mr. Harding, I do support this. I'm interested in policy and precedent. And I know that we have had other national championships in our city, maybe not as high profile as this, but still ones that have brought teams from across the country. I don't think they've all come asking for $30,000 or been granted $30,000. Do we have any type of policy around this type of funding request? I'm wondering if there is or there isn't. It's not a criticism. And how do we approach this in future? I also would note that the same request has been made to the regional district for $25,000, I believe. So, and that's a totally separate issue beyond this table. But I'm just curious about any policy that we have in this regard.
Yeah, Your Worship, Councillor Thorpe. There's no policy. This is particularly what we try to do is get in front of council on a major event early on. Examples, I guess, I would utilize would be BC Summer Games is very similar, where if we want to bid for the Summer Games, we have to ensure that we have some funding set aside for it. I believe on this one, this is one of the bid requirements from Hockey Canada. So it's one of sometimes the bid packages will show there needs to be some kind of local support, showing the financial support.
Thank you.
Anything further? All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carried. Thank you. The next is the Gallows Point dock and ramp repairs. Mr. Harding.
Thank you, Worship. Scott, you come up. So Ms. Mercer again dealt with a little bit of the funding option of this at council's meeting on Monday night. But we want to make sure council's aware of this project for Gallows Point dock repair. So again, the report on 93 and 107 is for background information. We just want to make sure you're aware of what we're doing there, why we're doing it. Also, I believe in a minute or so, with delegation from Mr. Wickham and David Carter of the Protection Island Neighborhood Association, just want to address council about the importance of that facility to them. but we want to make sure it's aware of council in front of them, and also that this is really some repairs we want to do now, but we're also planning long-term redevelopment enhancement of those facilities. And so kind of introduced it to you that we'll be doing those reports, those studies this year. Future capital presentations will include that project. So any questions? If not, I'll turn over to...
Your Worship, just before there's questions for staff, we hear from the delegation first.
Thank you. I was just about to say something. Welcome, gentlemen. Good morning. Yes. You had the choice spot with the mic that didn't seem to work.
Thank you for allowing me to come and speak this morning. My name is Gary Wycombe. I'm a member of the Protection Island Neighborhood Association. With me today is David Carter to help answer some questions. I'm going to make the assumption you've read the report that staff have provided. Lots of nodding heads. I'm happy to see that. Okay, check.
Nodding and talking on occasion.
We are here just to emphasize a couple of points. We believe staff's provided you with a real thorough report as to what's going on here. At our neighborhood association, we were a little bit worried that some people in the community might interpret this as some kind of optional or discretionary spending, that we're getting a dock and a boat ramp and we're going fishing. And that, in fact, is not the case. This is critical infrastructure, and you should not be criticized for supporting it. We have one road in and out of Protection Island. That's Covalton Trail. At the very end of Covalton Trail is a boat ramp. And if you can imagine living in your home and anything that you couldn't carry home with your own two hands, you have to bring by your car or a truck, or you get delivered, and here it comes up a boat ramp. And so this is critical infrastructure, as in the report: propane, firewood, household goods, even large amounts of groceries that people can't carry with their own two hands have to come up this boat ramp. And so we very much support the work, the effort that staff is putting into this. The ramp is several decades old. The dock is several decades old. This is critical infrastructure maintenance, part of your asset management plan, and we fully support having the repairs made to it so that we are able to still continue to bring supplies on and off the island. The other thing I would like to do is really compliment the staff. They're very much in tune, I think, of the implications of something being not the ramp being taken out of commission, not just simply by a catastrophic failure, but even just a portion of the ramp gets broken. Now all of a sudden there's weight limits and different things get put on it. Staff have been very patient, listening to us, and we believe very understanding of what our needs are, and being very responsive to putting a package together, trying to get it in front of City Council and get these repairs made. We're very appreciative of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wickman. Mr. Carter, do you wish to add anything to it?
Yeah, well, just to add to extend it, the Cal's point, of course, is our point of evacuation for first response and for island emergencies. And that too is as critical as the ramp is.
Thank you. Questions for the delegation? Councillor Armstrong.
Not the delegation.
No questions?
Move the recommendation.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Brown. Any discussion? Councillor Bonner, Councillor Shirley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm very much in favor of this report. I also believe that this is infrastructure. It's part of what one would call a road. But in this particular case, there should be roads on both sides. So I think that's something we have to talk about in the future, is how they get on this side as well. I would also like to remind council that had that dock not existed, 4 of us may not have made it back that one night at large in the dark when it was windy. So that was very important that that thing was there.
Imagine the tragedy of that, 4 politicians not making it to the other side.
We weren't politicians yet.
Inspiring. Councillor Shirley.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. To the staff, I certainly think it's necessary. My question is, I didn't see anywhere here an estimate of cost. Did I miss it?
Yeah, it's 100,000.
Oh, okay, I missed it. Thank you.
Under summary points.
And so already mentioned. It's already.
Any further, Councillor Thorpe?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll certainly support this. I think it is important infrastructure, and I just want to acknowledge the fact that Mr. Wycombe complimented our staff, and I think deservedly so. And I also want to return the compliment to the Protection Island Neighborhood Association for all the good work they do on the island. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
And I would second Councillor Thorpe's comments, and I think we're all conscious of the importance, value, and pleasure that Protection Island and its inhabitants and their commitment to community that they bring to the city of Nanaimo. So, having said that, all those in favor? Contrary? Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. The next is the Nanaimo Aquatic Centre score clock replacement.
Thank you, Worship. I didn't get to introduce Scott Newland, who is helping managing this project with the association and other projects, so he didn't get a chance to answer any of your technical questions. He's here to answer. But maybe he's also helped me with the rotary track, which is 2 down, so maybe you'll be able to ask him a tricky question there. Your Worship, just we've had an LED screen at the Aquatic Centre for a number of years. It's failing constantly and not able to maintain our swim meets. We're looking to replace it this year, not with the LED screen, but back to an actual score clock that's more purpose-built for aquatic events. So the recommendation is that the Finance and Audit Committee recommend that Council approve adding $32,000 to the 2019 budget for an LED numeric score clock for the Nanaimo Aquatic Centre to be funded from the Facility Development Reserve, and then $5,000 private contribution from the Nanaimo Riptide Swim Club.
Councillor Armstrong?
Move the recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Emmons. Any discussion? Councillor Turley?
Okay, thank you. Just a quick question through to Mr. Harding. So how many lanes, comparative lanes are at?
It's 8 long course, 16 if we do 2 short course back-to-back, which we haven't done a lot of lately in the past. And the majority of the demand is still either a long course event or just short, one tank for short course.
Any further discussion? Councillor Emmons?
I'd just like to express my gratitude for the selection of the lower cost option. I think that demonstrates fiscal prudence that I'm appreciative of, so thank you.
Nothing further. Councillor Martin?
Okay, for clarification, did we move option 1 or option 2?
There's a recommended motion in the...
Oh, that's option 1. Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carried. Thank you. Emergency track repairs at the Rotary Bowl. Mr. Harding?
Your Worship, again, this is one that's we thought we'd have another year. We could actually get through. We cannot. However, there's no. We've been able to find some funding sources both through our MIA provider and also through the club itself as a private donor that's contributed to it, so we can do the repairs before this season. And it's so the recommendations of Finance and Audit Committee received the report titled Emergency Track Repairs at Rotary Bowl, dated 2019 March 20th for information.
Move the recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. Wish to speak to it?
I just think it needs to be done. I think the legal ramifications are huge if we don't.
Councillor Thorpe?
Thank you, Your Worship. I certainly support it as well, but I do have a question, and that is the involvement of the Municipal Insurance Association. Was the track covering insured through them, or how are they involved?
Ms. Gray wants to answer that question.
I was just going to offer to answer it if you were unable to.
No, I can, but you can.
We'd be pleased to hear from both of you.
The Municipal Insurance Association provides grant monies every year to be used towards projects and or education that would help lower the risk to the municipality. So Mr. Harding often is the one that accesses that money without telling anybody else.
Because he doesn't need to.
And he uses it for projects that such as this one. So.
I could not have answered it better than
You're the
that.
enforcer.
I could not have answered it better than that.
Thank you. Very good.
I would, Your Worship, I would mention, again, this is we'll do this emergency repairs now. We do have longer issues there with the tree issues along that back side. So we have to come up with a longer term solution. This, of course, as council knows, we've only owned the facility for a year or so. So we're learning also some of the issues there we need to do. So a more comprehensive capital improvement plan will come back to you on the overall complex. But this one area particularly is one we'll have to deal with a little bit more in more detail later on.
Councillor Gesselbar?
Just out of curiosity through the chair, the barrier that's been suggested along the side to prevent the roots to get in, that's not foreseen as being a longer-term solution to the root problem?
We don't think so, because there's other issues with the trees rather than just the track. There's some drainage issues, and then, of course, the trail issue on the other side with the Parkway Trail. So we have a number of issues with the trees.
Lombard problem.
That's right.
Great.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carried.
And that's it for me, Your Worship.
There's no other business. Question period. No one signed up. Motion for adjournment. Councillor Bonner, second Councillor Markman. All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you very much, everyone. Good staff this morning.
Yes.
When you're doing those things like.